Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Campaign Middle East on the Record podcast, where we speak to leaders in the region and across the globe about the top trends and challenges facing the brand, marketing, and media landscape here in the Middle East. I'm Anup Oman, the editor of Campaign Middle East, and joining me on the show today is Nicola Porter, the executive editor at Bloomberg Media Studios. Nicola, thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
What does it feel like to be on the hot seat on the other side of
It's very strange, I'm not going to lie. I'm very much more used to being on the other side of the camera for my entire career, so this is slightly out of my natural habitat, but I'm just enjoying the novelty.
It's going to be a fun ride, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Nicola, I'm going to dive straight into this concept of storytelling, content creation, and what have you, but from the perspective of effectiveness. We've spoken a lot about, even before the show, about creativity, about the use of generative AI and AI as tech and tools, all these shiny little tools that are helping with storytelling and content creation, but approaching it from the perspective of effectiveness. Is there a need to look more into the outcomes, both in terms of brand outcomes and business outcomes, as well as the long-term effect that we're having on people, planet, societies, and communities?
I completely agree with that. I would say that I think now more than ever we're seeing that campaigns and activations around for brands has to have impact. That has to be impact on the people that are consuming them. So therefore, people want utility these days. They want to be educated around things. That's where corporate reputation comes in. I'll talk about that in a second. But I think also around the impact and the legacy that it's having socially, culturally, environmentally. And there's more demand now on organizations to actually share what their brand values are, and that we're seeing a connection between that and then better business outcomes.
Right.
Bloomberg recently, we actually surveyed business leaders, our audiences, around corporate reputation and some of the actionable outcomes from that. And we could actually see that thought leadership plays a huge part, which is no surprise to me because that is a lot of what we do within our team at Bloomberg Media Studios.
People are following people at the moment.
Exactly.
Not just brands, yeah.
So thought leadership is playing an ever-increasing role, but also I think it allows organizations to actually show the impact that they're going to have. And with this survey that we actually just put out, it actually did show there was a real connection. It was one of the top connections on driving customer loyalty and the brand value that comes from increasing that corporate reputation and essentially brand equity, which I think sometimes can be put second to performance outcomes. But actually it was showing there was a real connection between the two, which for me was very exciting because when we're looking at storytelling and we're looking at creative execution, being able to share some of that thought leadership on behalf of the brands, we see that drives a really good engagement with our audiences.
It's fascinating because even, as journalists, as the editor of Campaign Middle East, we get a lot of thought leadership from a lot of people. But in this day and age, especially over the last 1-2 years, I think that dependency on AI-generated content has come up. Ever since generative AI tools such as ChatGPT, Perplexity, and all of these have come out, there's a lot more what we call noise that's come out. And from a consumer perspective, there's this AI fatigue that is built in. Notwithstanding, there is still importance within storytelling. There is still importance within thought leadership. Is there a balance that we need to find in that sense that without putting AI on the shelf, to gain cultural insights from the LLMs that we're getting, along with our human authenticity that we're bringing to the table, our critical thinking skills that we're bringing to the table, and marry them in a way that we're creating stories, telling stories as a force for good?
Absolutely. I think it depends on how you see the combination of using those technologies and tools at hand, and then how you're going to marry that with human creativity and execution. That's the way that I would approach it. I think that we've got tools now within Bloomberg, but obviously out in the market, where we can understand our audiences in a much deeper level, what they're engaging with, what their interests are. We can map that to see what other interests they've got across the different platforms, as well as be able to look at brands and look at industries and see what's driving the narrative, where the white space is. So all of those things are incredibly useful to a creative strategy. And in the past, I mean, I never had that back in the day,
That's
you know.
true.
So for
We had
me,
to build on our intuition and our understanding
absolutely.
of people and reading people's body language and all of that. Yeah.
And you're throwing this out to the universe and
Yeah.
just hoping that it sticks. So now we can actually approach a creative strategy in a much more data-driven way, which is incredibly useful because you can almost then guarantee the success of the campaign. So that's really helpful. But that doesn't replace the human lived experiences, passion, integrity that you take into a creative strategy as well. And I think that, you know, AI is awesome at many things and it's becoming invaluable. And probably by the time this podcast goes out, it would have changed. You know, it's moving so quickly. But what it doesn't do, I think, is build trust. And we take trust extremely importantly. You know, building that trust, building a reputation is incredibly important for brands these days to be able to cut through the noise. We know that, you know, I don't necessarily agree that people's attention spans are shrinking, but I think there's so much more out there that is vying for your attention. Right. So creating content that is going to cut through that white noise and reach those audiences and be meaningful and be educational and be sticky is difficult. And if you are just exposed to AI generated content that doesn't speak to you, it has no personalization, it's not taking those audience insights and creating something that is going to reach out of the screen and speak to you directly, Anoop.
Yeah. I feel like we've discussed this on panels as well, because there is this time that brands and agencies and various entities have been fighting for our time and attention over the past few years. But I feel now moving forward, trust and empathy have become a really big player as to whether a consumer is going to develop brand love, develop brand loyalty, continue following a media or continue looking at a channel or a platform. And there are few people who've done this right while still keeping the trust, empathy, and having that social good parameter in place. And I mean, just off the top of my head, Dove comes out.
That's one of my most favorite campaigns. I think
Right.
Real Beauty is something I followed for a really long time. It's 20 years old now. And I think what they do so well is insert themselves into the cultural zeitgeist and to create a way to be relevant within that conversation. And I think what it also does is create an opportunity for the creative industries to also have a part to play in building that legacy and that impact and being socially, culturally, environmentally astute. And when we look at something like the AI generated campaign that they did recently, looking at what these LLMs are perceiving to be beauty, and then if you actually insert Dove, what Dove Real Beauty stands for, and widening that, it goes to show you that there is a real opportunity for creative industries to be feeding into those AI technologies right now that is going to have a lasting positive impact. Right. So for me, I think that's what we also reflect on in our teams. What can we do right now that is then going to create that legacy and impact for the future? And that's a really exciting place to play, I think.
I like that, because this speaks really strongly to the marketing and advertising landscape as well, because we have a consultative role to play, so to speak, that we have to advise brands, we have to advise people, entities, government entities here in the region as well, as to how quickly consumer behavior, consumer preferences are changing, consumer sentiment is changing, or brand sentiment is changing. And alongside that, we also have to show them data, that backs that fact. Can you give some examples of how this has come into being, or how marketers should then shape this consultation based on the data that they're receiving?
Yeah, I think we play a very consultative role with many of the clients that we work with. And I think that's a great opportunity for us and also for them to be able to partner up and to bring what we can in terms of our data, whether that be the insights we get from our proprietary data tools around the audiences, the brands, the industries, or whether that's on some of the studies and research that we conduct with our audiences. I think what it does, I mean, if you were to take, for instance, we did a research recent travel and tourism study for our luxury travel audience, high net worth individuals, and how it's informing their decision making, what's informing their decision making. And it's incredibly useful to see some of those insights around their travel habits, what they see as important. More than 3/4 of the people surveyed said sustainability is key in their decision making now, which is really useful for our clients to understand, what they need to actually prioritize within their own businesses, but also then the communication that follows with that, right? So we use those data and insights to help inform the clients of their own business priorities and outcomes as much as it's used within a creative strategy. And I think having that consultative partnership with organizations is a really, really great opportunity for us.
I find it fascinating because I feel like you sit in a perfect little space between brand marketers and the consumers. And we sit in an interesting time. I'll just throw a curveball in there in the sense that we're not living in a time where communication is one-dimensional anymore. It's not just one way from brands to consumers. There is this ability to actually sit back and listen. Not listen for the sake of responding, but actually listen and take back their feedback, whether it comes on social media or through social listening tools or through surveys. But there is so much first-party data. People are communicating. They're trying to tell a story. They're trying to tell people and brands and governments that this is what we actually feel. And there's a way to tap into that if we just lean into that data.
Yeah, I come from a journalistic background, editorial background. So my route to this world now and, marketing and advertising is quite unconventional. But actually, I think sometimes that can be a superpower in a way, because I can take some of the learnings from that background and apply it into this world now. And I think when it comes to the question of authenticity and the way that you communicate with your organizations, their partners, or audiences, I think that's what it comes down to, is creativity and authenticity together, and trying to get a person on one side of the world to care about what's happening to somebody on the other side of the world, whether that's through journalism or whether that's through creative storytelling, what we do now. That's really powerful, and I think that's where we need to be. So I think combining within my team, we have people that have got film backgrounds, people that come from creative agency, a few people like me that come from more editorial journalistic backgrounds, and that together is actually a great combination of different skill sets and disciplines that come in and allow you to approach the type of storytelling that we're doing now in quite a unique but great way. It's quite powerful.
I think that's interesting as well, because now we're not talking just about confluence of cultures at the consumer level, but it's also internally at the employee level, and how we have a group of people from around the world adding different perspectives to it. I'm going to build on these examples that we're doing, because I feel like there's a lot more power in actual stories, right? Than like we've talked about. We've given a lot of examples of hypotheticals and and opinions. I'd like to flesh out or pull out a few examples, on ground examples that you have on how you've seen this changed perception, influence your storytelling on ground through partnerships or brand partnerships that you've got existing. I know Bloomberg works very closely with the Red Sea Global, for example. Is there anything from on ground, like an actual example, a live example that you've been and you've experienced, that you can then, rather than change the perceptions of people across the globe on the other side of the pond, like you were saying, take an actual live lived experience and share it with them so that they have an additional layer rather than a changed perception?
We work a lot with clients across the region. In Saudi, as you say, I travel in and out all the time, have done for many years, and I think that, you know, the pace of change and transformation is not anything surprising to us necessarily sitting here, but I think to a global audience it is still quite remarkable, and we feel a deep responsibility and opportunity to be able to articulate that pace of change and the transformation to a global audience. And I would say it's less about changing perceptions, it's more about offering a transparent view of reality.
Yeah.
Challenging perceptions, maybe. I think often perceptions don't necessarily come from actual experiences that people have had. I think it's more learned behavior. So I think actually just having a platform where you can show the richness and the diversity and the pace of change that's happening to any young Saudi woman right now, being able to drive almost a generation ago in Saudi years, because it happened so long ago and things, so much has changed since then. But in some parts of the world, that might still be the kind of narrative that they pick
That's
up on.
so true. We've discovered this, like, even in our Saudi edition of the magazine, it just so happens to be here. The perceptions from across the world are still about an oil-reliant economy, from a business angle, or, you know, camel riding, or, you know, having coffee with Bedouins at the top of a mountain, you know. But the friends that I have and the people that we've communicated with have seen Cristiano Ronaldo play against Benzema. They've seen boxing matches, they've seen MMA fights, they've seen Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen on the Jeddah Corniche. You know, they've gone to Middle East, they've swum in the Red Sea or gone scuba diving in the Red Sea, and when we share these lived experiences, what the hospitality, the culture, the heritage, the tradition, in that juxtaposition with all your modern conveniences, all your Instagrammable places, all those wonderful experiences that then become memories, the idea of Saudi, the idea of the Middle East suddenly transforms.
Absolutely. And I think, look, there's a place for everything you've just mentioned there and all of the big global events and everything that's setting the stage for Saudi as a destination. I think there's definitely a place for that. What we always try to do is actually just bring basic human connection, and it seems so simple, but I think
examples of
absolutely. I mean, we were, you know, recently filming in Saudi down in the Red Sea, and we were at the Red Sea Global Destinations, which are incredible if anyone has the opportunity to go. No affiliation, but really amazing. But we were climbing up a mountain with actually a young Saudi woman who is heading up the adventure tourism and a elder tribesman, and he had incredible stories to tell about his childhood and his experiences in that region. His English wasn't as confident. He was excellent English, but he wasn't as confident to speak. So we said, look, you know, we paired him with this young, vibrant, articulate Saudi woman who is just she was a firecracker, and between the two of them they just created this great chemistry, because he had more confidence to speak, and if there was something he couldn't speak in English, then she would translate for him, and on camera that just created such a compelling narrative. And we would be the top of the mountain sitting down having coffee together, and what you realize and what we always try to ensure is comes through in our storytelling is that actually people have got so much more in common than they do actually have differences. And that, to me, is where the magic happens, because if you can articulate that to a global audience to show actually these people on this side of the world are not actually that different to you, then they're more likely to resonate with that content and therefore whatever those business outcomes that you want it to be, you know. So that, to me, is where we start, with that point of connection, those similarities and that authenticity that is actually not this new version of contrived authenticity that we're seeing a lot, but natural. Genuine.
Yeah, natural, original, authentic. I love that example because it shows that you have space for somebody to share their story the way they want to share it, without any plugs, without, even if the cameras were not around, if the mics were not around, we'd still be having this conversation in a language that we're comfortable in, sharing stories that we're comfortable in. And when that message goes out to the rest of the world saying, hi from Dubai or hi from the Middle East, in a conversation in this setting, suddenly it shares a different perspective of everything that's happening. Before we wrap up, take a second, Nicole, and share from your perspective, what's the parting message? If you get one shot, one opportunity, to quote Eminem, to share a message to the rest of the world, especially to the brand marketing audience, what would it be?
I think, look, we live in a place that is incredibly multicultural. My kids are little. They go to a school with 80 to 90 different nationalities in their school. How incredibly lucky are those kids,
Yeah,
to be in a
so
playground with all of those people from different parts of the world. But that also extends to us, the grown-ups. We are surrounded by people that have got different perspective, lived experiences, education, and I think actually taking yourself out of an echo chamber and creating those connections with people that you don't know. We have an incredible opportunity to do that here, and I would say go for it. Meet people, make those connections, because that is so rich and it's so rare and it's such a great opportunity here. So embrace that, and I think embrace AI and all of the tools that you have at your disposal, but know what their role is within your world right now and within your business world and what they can do for you. I'm a huge reader as well, so I think still pick up a book and read, even if we've got all of these technologies around us, and I think that would be my parting message. Yeah.
Fantastic. And isn't that the perfect way to end this discussion? Meet people, read books, engage more with each other, find the right stories to tell. Don't shy away from leaning into AI. Understand that they are still tools to a means to an end, not the end itself. Thank you for joining us on the show once again, Nicola.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
It's a pleasure. I know you asked me to call you Nikki, but throughout
That's
the
all
show,
right.
I've just been
That's
stuck
okay.
on
I didn't
Nicola.
even notice.
That's absolutely fine. And on that note, thank you for joining us as well. For more such conversations with experts in the industry, stay tuned to Campaign Middle East's ongoing On the Record podcast. That's all for now, and until next time, goodbye.